Well, it's time now for today's message, and it's a great one. And would you welcome from Adelaide, Reverend Phyllis Grace. Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you, Reverend Bill. And it's always good to connect with you people. I was talking to someone the other day, and she asked me if I've attended a Sunday service regularly, and I said yes. And she said, "Oh, where do you go?" I said, "On Zoom." And I'm truly grateful that I can do that. It's lovely. How green is your garden? Thanks, Jeanette. That was a beautiful slide. It fitted so beautifully with my talk title, so I appreciate that. But just as an aside, I want to just share with you something that happened earlier in the week. Last Sunday, I still hadn't come up with a title for today. And as I was laying in bed that night, I had the thoughts running through my mind. A couple came up, and then I came up with this one, and I thought, yes, that works well. And so I went to bed thinking of how I could approach the talk and give it some thought. And I realised very well that it fitted so nicely with a Facebook post that I had seen during last week. And so the next morning, Monday morning, I started writing. And I had been at the computer for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, when one of my daughters rang and asked me if I would like to join them at the Botanic Gardens in Adelaide. Well, I laughed and decided, well, yes, I love the Botanic Gardens. So off I went. I hopped on the tram and joined them in the city at the Botanical Gardens. Serendipity, coincidence, or what? I'll leave that to decide. But I just found it really wonderful that I was thinking gardens and how that could apply to my talk. And then my daughter rings to invite me to join them at our beautiful Botanic Gardens. Do you enjoy gardening and wandering through beautiful gardens or bushlands? I certainly do. When I was a single mum caring for my 5 children, the garden was my go-to place for peace and quiet. And I found that even pulling weeds was beneficial to my mental health. I often got so involved, however, with what I was doing, keeping an eye or ear on what the children were up to, that I would forget the time and need to be reminded that it was lunchtime or dinner time, depending on what time of the year it was, or when I had gone out into the garden. That happened, of course, more during summer when we were on daylight saving than during winter. Although the children were able to help themselves to snacks, there was no need for them to be hungry. And the boys' most favourite go-to snack was bread, butter and Vegemite. I think they all love their bread, butter and Vegemite still. But they would still come to me asking when were they going to get fed. They also would often say to me, you know, you spend more time with the plants than you do with us. And my response to that was, well, the plants don't answer back. Of course, there were many days when I didn't get out to spend time in the garden, tending to the plants, particularly in the winter. And often I would only take time to go out to water the garden in the summer in order to keep the plants alive and green. Obviously, to young children on those days during the weekend or holidays that I spent time in the garden was always far too long. Today, no children around, I can spend as much time as I like in the garden. Much, much smaller garden I have now. I actually had a garden that covered almost two blocks, but that was another story. But I do enjoy tending my small veggie garden and delight in being able to eat something that I have grown in that small garden. I have been enjoying recently an abundant supply of lettuce, baby Roma tomatoes, chard and rhubarb. And I'm pleased to say that each of my children have developed an interest in gardening as they've grown older, and find that they too delight from seeing their efforts produce results. I get great joy seeing seeds or even seedlings grow and develop to mature plants, offering an abundance of produce and or beauty in the form of flowers. I have flowers in my garden that have been self-seeded from plants I put in the garden several years ago, and they still give me great joy as they pop up each year and spread their little leaves and then produce beautiful flowers. Of course, some of the seeds that are produced are blown away, only to die, because they did not fall on ground where they would get the nourishment and sun required for their germination and growth, which only happens when that germination and growth only happens, of course, when they have access to proper requirements like nourishment as well as sunlight. As a truth student, I know that within the seed is the perfect pattern for the plant I grow. Well, I'm sure most people, whether they're truth students or not, know that. As gardeners, I know that the seed has the ability to express the fullness of its perfection when given the right conditions. I know that if the plant that I grow or the seed that I put in the ground is a tomato seed, I expect and know for sure, I have faith that it will grow tomato plants and produce an abundance of beautiful tomatoes. I was interested to learn how many times gardens were mentioned in the Bible. And I had a difficult time trying to get a definitive answer. Some sites suggested there were 52 times, others just 15. And one site suggested it depended on what version of the Bible you looked at. Interesting. However, there are 3 gardens that we generally know about that are mentioned in the Bible, and I'm sure you could name them, but I'll just remind you anyway. The Garden of Eden, the Garden of Gethsemane, and the garden near Golgotha, which was where the tomb was that Jesus was laid in after his crucifixion. But on further research, I learned that there is a garden mentioned in Song of Solomon, which is Solomite's garden. It really is a description, I believe, of a woman and her body, suggesting that within that body or the garden of the woman's body is the seed that will produce beautiful humans to come. I also learned in doing my research that there are about 148 individual plants mentioned in the Bible. Now that was news to me. And that a Dr. Tatham Whitehead, who was a botany professor at the University College of North Wales during the 1950s and 1960s, established the Bible Garden. And it's near the cathedral outside Bangor in Wales. The late Gerald Robinson was so inspired by that garden, he was an Australian, I believe, that he established a similar garden in Palm Beach, Sydney. Anyone been there? I haven't. But unfortunately, due to the lack of funding, not all of that garden has survived. However, there is a portion of it still available for us to visit. And there is also another Bible garden that has been established in Canberra, another one I didn't know about. I would love to be able to go and visit with both of them. I think it would be most interesting. I came across this lovely reference to what gardens in the Bible represent that reads, "Ordered and well watered, a garden can symbolize the abundance that God offers to human beings, the quiet care that can produce fruitfulness in our lives and in the world around us, and the hope that what is buried in death can produce great beauty." As a gardener, you would know that a seed looks very dead when we plant it. And as a gardener, you would also know that given the nourishment and care, that seemingly dead seed will produce a new plant. The Facebook page I mentioned earlier, you might recall, was one of Unity of Melbourne's Facebook pages. I didn't tell you what it was about, but it certainly fits very well into my talk. It read, and it's a quote from Charles Fillmore. Thank you, Wendy. I believe you would have done it. Words are also seeds, and when dropped into the invisible spiritual substance, they grow and bring forth after their kind. You remember reading that one on Facebook, anyone? They're always a delight to discover, Wendy, and I thank you for that. When I read that one, I was reminded of the many instances when our words or thoughts, which are words unspoken, can be seen as an allegory for seeds. They can flourish and grow, regardless of what kind of thoughts they are. Emily Cady wrote in How I Use Truth, and I quote, God is just as much the life of the seed when it is being planted in the dark earth, where, to the human sense, it is dead and all is lost, as he is in the life of the new leaf, which a few days later bursts into sight. In fact, it is because God is there at the centre, working in the stillness, unseen, and not at all because of the fussy, noisy outside work which you and I do, that the seed comes forth into newness of life. Of course, we as the gardener can encourage that growth to come forth. Jesus used seeds and plants to share his message on many occasions, and one that reminds us of this month's power was found in Matthew 20:21, when he told the disciples, "For truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to that mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible." He used metaphors and allegories that he knew his listeners would understand, and they have stood the test of time because they are metaphors and allegories that we too can understand. Remember the other thing that Jesus did, demonstrating his love of, well, it may not have demonstrated the love of, but his faith, when he cursed the fig tree and it withered. There are lots and lots of instances where he used that plant life in his message. When we plant seeds in our gardens and we want them to grow into healthy plants, we like to support them in every possible way by providing them with the appropriate conditions for that growth to happen. Likewise, if we are sick and tired of being sick and tired, we have to make changes in what we think, say, and do. Otherwise, our life just goes on as it was. Our outer world can only change when we change our inner world. If I want the seed I planted to grow, watering them just once is generally not going to do the trick. They might come forth, but they don't produce very healthy plants or fruit. I must be disciplined and water and feed those seeds and plants constantly. So, to change our inner world, our thoughts that will translate to our words and actions, we must be vigilant in keeping our thoughts focused on what we desire to see in our own world. Charles Fillmore wrote, Jesus spoke in terms of that inner world which creates all things. He knew that his words were vivified with a life essence and a moving power that would demonstrate the truth of his statement. These words have rung through the souls of men and set them afire, I would say men and women there, with God's Spirit throughout the ages. This is because, he says, they are spiritual words that have within them the seeds of a divine life, of a perfect wholeness. They grow in the minds of all who give them a place. Of course, if we don't plant the seed, it's generally not going to grow, is it? So those ideas have to be planted in our mind in order for them to grow. So if we want our lives to express the truth of our being, which is life, love, joy, peace, and compassion, then the seeds that we must plant are thoughts and words that reflect those sentiments. Then at any time we find we are thinking and or speaking words that are not in alignment with those qualities, it is important that we deny them any power over us and then focus on those qualities we want to express. Like the song said earlier, I choose to express peace. Eric Butterworth, in a talk that he gave, said that even Jesus had negative thoughts, but Jesus disidentified from the patterns and recognized that something had to be done and decided to do it. When tempted by his negative thoughts, Satan in the Bible, he simply said, "Get thee behind me, get thee hence." In other words, he said no to those negative thoughts. This is a tremendous lesson, and it's one that we tend to overlook. We have always a choice. We can always choose yes, or we can choose no. Denials and affirmations are a great tool, and recently I came across another idea that can help us change our thoughts and feelings about a situation, be it a challenge or a dispute we have experienced with another, or even the thoughts we have about ourselves. We may find our thoughts and feelings are of resentment, anger, frustration, etc. And William A. Goff, who wrote a book called How to Claim Your Good, published by Unity in 1960, offered this. When you become aware of these negative thoughts and feelings, become like the fireman that he had observed when attending a fire. He wrote about how efficiently and calmly those firemen work, and with that steady directness, they poured on water. Said there was never any panic. They just went about their job calmly. And that made a great impression on William. When you become aware of these negative thoughts and feelings, become like the fireman, he suggests, when attending that fire. They never ignore the most insignificant blaze and never hesitate to tackle the most serious kind of fire. They just plug in and pour water. It is the water of love that William suggests we use to diffuse those negative feelings and thoughts, and then we are able to focus on the good that is inherently within us. It's inherently within us. We are expressions of God, and so all that good is within us. Our part is to make that choice to express that. We have to remember we are divine beings and nourish and support a consciousness of knowing this truth so that we can be the very best expression of that truth. Remember, like the seed, we have within us all of that we need to attune to that spiritual Christ self. We don't need to go looking for it, search for it. It is within us. All we need to do is claim it. It is within every one of us, waiting to be set free and blossom. If we want the garden of our mind to be green and productive, providing abundant joy, love, peace, and happiness in our lives, William suggests pour a steady stream of love onto those fires of irritation, anger, doubt, hatred, resentment, fear, anxiety, whatever the negative thought is, and see them become clear and calm and beautiful, extinguished by loving faith. Like the gardener who will get rid of the weeds so that any nourishment that is provided to the garden is really fully available to the plants they want to see grow, we need to weed out the negative thoughts and nourish the positive thoughts. Negativity is not conducive to us expressing fully the truth of our spiritual self. And so surely that is why we enjoy being part of the Unity community, so that we can continue our spiritual growth and learn how we can use these spiritual truths and become a shining light to the world. Whatever method we use to rid our minds and hearts of negative thoughts and feelings that affect our actions and attitudes toward ourselves and others, it is important that we are vigilant and self-aware of what we think, say, and do, so that we are expressing from our divine self and not so much from our human self. Yes, honour your humanity, knowing that it is through your humanity that you express your divinity, or the level of spiritual consciousness that you have. You are the gardener. You can choose what you want to grow. Let the garden of your mind be free from negativity, so that plants of love, peace, harmony within you can be experienced by all. So as Costa Gorgadis often says at the end of Gardening Australia, go out and get planting. God bless you all.
Well, thank you, Reverend Phyllis. That was just wonderful. It's always good to hear about gardens in particular, and you've really illustrated them well. You've got me thinking now about those other gardens in the Bible. Anyway, that's for this afternoon. Would you thank Reverend Phyllis once again, please? That was great. And Phyllis has